Hi everyone, this is Chris Decker from the PhUSE Computational Science Symposium. I'm standing in for Scott Bhavin today. I wanted to welcome everybody to today's webinar. We have a very packed webinar today where we're going to review a number of the projects that are coming up in the first annual European Computational Science Symposium. So I'm going to quickly go through some slides today, but just a number of logistical items. If you have any questions or comments during the course of the presentation, please enter them into the chat window, and we will take those questions and either be able to answer them at the end or follow up with answers if time doesn't permit for us to answer those on this call. And then so everyone is on mute, and we have a number of panelists today who will be presenting to you on various topics. So I wanted to talk just quickly about the paradigm shift of the computational science collaboration, as well as other PhUSE working groups and projects that are ongoing. Our goal here is to get away from a one-sided communication and put people around the table from FDA, EMA, other regulatory agencies, sponsors, vendors, and really work to solve problems or work on innovative solutions for some of the topics that we have to address in the process of developing and approving products in our space. So the mission of the collaboration, and I won't read this word for word, but I will point out a couple of very important words, and those are transparent and non-competitive. The idea is that everyone from academia to regulators to industry and technology providers can sit around a table and really work on these issues and bring all of the expertise that we have within the industry together to solve these problems and look at new ways of doing things. The collaboration framework is very simple. It's the working groups and the annual symposium. Now we have to introduce a new bubble into this after this year's June event, and now say that we have multiple symposiums over the course of the year. And this all makes up the computational science collaboration. We have 5 working groups that are under this umbrella of the collaboration at the moment. In addition, we have a number of other working groups and projects that aren't necessarily in this umbrella, but are under other areas which you'll learn more about, the future forums and other projects. But these are the 5 that are in the current computational science collaboration that we have pushed forward over the last 5 years with a strong collaboration with FDA at the beginning. At this moment, we have over 30 active projects that are ongoing. It's kind of amazing when you see that number and think about all the work that's being done by hundreds and hundreds of volunteers in this engagement. So we wanted to put this up because this year we had a very neat tool that we used near the end of the conference in March to ask people what was the 1 word or 2 words that they thought about this conference. And you can tell the main word that popped out with everybody was collaboration. Now, in addition to collaboration, we also had Guinness and burrito. So I'm not sure exactly what that says, but no, in all seriousness, I think this collaboration was a key aspect of this conference and the ongoing collaboration. We decided this year that we wanted to try this collaboration or physically have an event in Europe to continue the ongoing interactions between working groups and volunteers. And why? Well, the reality is collaboration innovation is a global thing. It's not in one country or one continent. We've had a number of European colleagues make significant contributions to the collaboration over the years in various roles. And over 20% of our attendees in any given year has been from Europe, those that have come across the pond. And in addition, we even had a number of folks from PDMA this year and the Japan organization come over as well. So this is really turning into a global innovation collaboration. So the thought was, let's have a meeting in Europe to continue this discussion. So the European CSS will be June 21st and the 22nd in Basel, Switzerland. We will focus on a subset. So at our usual conference, we have all of the working groups and all of the projects. In this case, we've identified about 6 projects, both from this collaboration as well as the Future Forums initiative that PhUSE is undertaking. And we'll be tackling those projects at this event in June. Lillian Rosario, the Director of the Office of Computational Science at the FDA, will be coming over to give a keynote on how important global collaboration is to support what they want to do as an organization as well. It's free to PhUSE members, and we've filled up very quickly, and we have less than 20 to 30 spots available. So we suggest you sign up now, as there won't be room after the next week or two. And go to the website to do that. The agenda, as I mentioned on Tuesday, we'll have the keynote and the opening session Tuesday afternoon. We'll then have a breakout where the working groups will kind of go over a number of their projects just to give you an introduction. We will then have an event that we held at our March CSS conference in Silver Spring, Maryland, around Semantics 101 for pharma. How can we use this newfangled concept of semantics in real-world situations? It was very well attended in March, and we plan to replicate it at this event. Wednesday, we'll have our main day where the working groups will break out. Specifically, the individual projects that we've identified will break out and work together on the various solutions. And then we'll have a wrap-up and closing near the end of the day and see everybody off. So this is a smaller version, a mini version of our event in the United States. These are the 6 projects that we're going to tackle, and I'm not going to go through them in any detail because we have speakers on the phone who are going to go through these. But we have identified, as I mentioned, key projects that we've implemented or started or are ongoing within our initiative. Some of them are specific to the computational science collaboration, and a few of them are other individual PhUSE projects and future forum projects that are being tackled as well. So I wanted to go through that quickly because I'm not the most important speaker here. That is the others that are going to chat with you about the various projects. So I'm going to hand it off now to Nigel Montgomery, who's going to talk a little bit about the Computing Environments project. Nigel, that should be coming across to you. Hopefully you will get that and be able to turn off mute and take over. There you go. I can see you. I can't hear you. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you and we can see you.
Wonderful. Can you see my screen okay?
We can, yep.
Super. Thanks, Chris. So, hi everyone. For those that don't know me, my name is Nigel Montgomery. I'm based here in Basel at Novartis. I will be chairing the SCE workstream at this year's EU CSS. And of course, I'm presenting on behalf of not just myself, but the leadership team within the SCE project, so Art Collins and Steve Madison also. So I will try to keep it fairly short. As Chris says, we have lots of presentations to come today, so I'll quickly move on. So the content, we've been discussing this over the past few weeks, and we feel we very much would like to build upon what was done in Maryland in the CSS in March. The team of 16, I believe, attended here for the SCE workstream, put together a strong framework for the SCE, where they had 5 pillars, so the acquire, transform, analyze, visualize, and delivery pillars. And they put together some very high-level user requirements. What we'd like to do in Basel is build upon that, and I've provided a snapshot of what was done in Maryland just below. For those eagle-eyed people that have said, that have spotted, I mentioned 5, but you can actually see 6 here, so there's an additional system that I haven't mentioned above. And indeed, we may add to these pillars. So system is certainly one which would fit this bill. So that's not to say we will continue to add to these pillars. Okay, moving on. And the team, we've been trying to put together some simple use cases from each pillar. So each pillar of the framework, so that we can use in the SCE project team for discussion in the Basel SCE. Okay, and moving on to the format. So as Chris has already highlighted, we have a couple of days or a day and a half, but within the SCE workstream, we'd certainly like to summarize what was done at the Maryland CSS and give the people who signed up for the SCE workstream a chance to introduce themselves, to give everyone else a background of what kind of area they come from, what's their expertise, so we know who we're working with throughout the discussions. On day two, sorry, I'll jump back to day one. On day one, we have approximately 45 minutes to 1 hour session just to cover those two topics. On day two, again, we will have breakout sessions, so these are much larger sessions, and we'd like to delve into some of the detail on the pillars already covered from the Maryland CSS. And at the end of the day, we'd like to have a summary and a conclusion session of 1 hour. So that's the kind of format, and just to give you some numbers up front, so to date we have 17 people signed up for the SCE workstream, which is already one more than the Maryland CSS. And again, we have attendees. I've been looking through the list of attendees. We have attendees from a diverse background, people from diverse backgrounds, from diverse industries, and I think this should lead to people hearing a different perspective on what they feel an SCE should be. So I can see people from a technical background, I can see people from a user background, and I think this should lead to some good discussions. Some of the exercises we want to put together should lead to kind of thought-provoking exercises and should be fairly stimulating for the audience and kind of push us forward with the SCE workstream. So with that, I just hope you can join on the 21st and 22nd of June and hopefully see you in the SCE workstream. And I believe my next slide is for questions, but if you have any questions, then please add them to the facility as Chris mentioned earlier. Thank you. I will hand over to Geoff Low now, the next presenter.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to speak about the Alternative Transport Format project, which is a relatively new project, but one that's quite exciting, I think, in terms of what we're trying to do. So we all know about SAS Transport File, SAS Transport version 5. It was initiated in around 1989, and it's still in use today. So I wanted to sort of very briefly reflect on other things that were around in 1989, just to see if there's been any changes. So around 1989, the peak of entertainment was obviously the Nintendo Game Boy. This has now obviously been replaced by and large by your cell phone, but also by the 3DS. So there's been sort of a quantum leap there. The Batmobile has obviously transitioned to something a bit more militarized over these few years. And also in 1989, well, I think I'll just leave that one. So the world itself has moved on. We're still using this old format for moving clinical data around. We're looking at this project in terms of trying to come up with some way of replacing a SAS transport file and working out what it is that we need to be able to do so. In doing so, we want to put together a white paper that talks about essentially just enumerating all the different problems that currently exist with the SAS transport file, because I'm sure a lot of us on the call are aware of these issues, and each of you might have one or more issues. We want to try and sort of collapse that into sort of a canonical list, and then include that as part of the transport file. Also, we want to look at some of the previous efforts to replace the SAS transport file. Obviously, there was the meeting in 2012 with the FDA. One of the outcomes of that was the Dataset XML specification was suggested, and a pilot was run with that, but the outcome of that wasn't entirely overwhelming in success. And part of that, we think, was simply because when it was submitted as a possible solution, it wasn't entirely clear what use cases against which the new format was being evaluated. So the format itself failed against a set of criteria that weren't explicit. And so what we wanted to try and do was see if we could actually come up with some submission use cases that we could use for actually evaluating any new transport formats. Obviously, being that everybody is familiar with the SAS transport file, we're not writing that one completely off. There is the enhanced SAS transport file, which may be a genuine solution. But we want to be able to come up with a set of criteria that we can use to actually evaluate these different formats with a view to coming up with some sort of as objective as at all possible characterization of these different formats and how they could be used. Now, obviously, the project is about the transport formats, but there has also been some discussion within the group about not only how we're transferring the data, but also the content that we're transferring. And so that conversation has been coming up on a number of occasions, looking at how we can we currently express relationships within concepts within SAS transport files or data sets themselves. We want to see if there could be a better approach to that. So our methodology is essentially these use cases which we suspect exist but are not in a position to have access to. We thought, well, perhaps the easiest way to do that, if we're not going to get the use cases, is essentially develop a set of criteria against which we can use, we can evaluate these alternative formats. So what our group have been working on is essentially sort of drawing out these different criteria. And then we wanted to make sure that, well, if we're going to come up with a set of criteria, we want to try and rank them as all possible based on business needs. So sponsors, CROs, regulatory agents. Each group has a different ranking to the different kind of criteria, such as file size or ability to represent relationships within the data. Each of these are going to be, may have different prioritizations within these different groups. So what we thought is we'll define these criteria and we'll make them available, and then we'll send out a questionnaire to the industry as a whole to allow them to rank these based on their particular area of interest. The idea is we can actually come up with, if you will, a ranked evaluation set or a weighted evaluation set. So then we can start evaluating these different formats, and we can also do it in such a way that we're actually reflecting not sort of an arbitrary list, but a weighted list of criteria that the industry as a whole think is important. And then once we've done this, we want to then be able to use this to evaluate some proposed format replacements. We already have a few that we've put together, so just spitballing, and we're going to be, that's sort of down the track. We think probably the criteria is going to be the first white paper that we put out on this. So at the event itself, we'll have a reasonably free-flowing agenda. I'm going to start off with introducing the group for any new participants who attend on the day. And then over that day, we want to finalize, over the period itself, we want to actually finalize the criteria and publish them up to the PhUSE Wiki so people can start looking at them and having to think about them as to what they think is going to be important. And then we're going to do a survey monkey or something similar to allow organizations within the industry to be able to evaluate these criteria and rank them according to their wants and needs. Because we absolutely, this is important. This is what we want to be able to do. And so that's what we're focused on. Thank you very much. I will now pass.
Hello?
Hello, Jeff. Did you pass it off to Jean-Marc? I lost your voice, Jeff. Can I hear Jean-Marc's?
Yeah, I just
Okay.
also lost the sound. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen, and I can see you, and I can hear you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Geoff. Thanks, Chris. My name is Jean-Marc Ferran. I'm an independent consultant based in Copenhagen. I've been involved with PhUSE for, I think, 8 years now on various committee positions, board positions, and more recently in the leadership of this working group around data transparency. We were not formally part of the CSS setup in the first place, but I think we're slowly moving into it now, which is great. So how did PhUSE came to work on data transparency? Well, I think in 2013, there was more and more, you could say, efforts, in particular from the EMA, to encourage sharing of individual patient data and CSRs. What we could see back then is that sponsors were starting their own initiatives, sharing IPD through portals, and some of the remarks were that the data were shared in different data models. Each company were defining their own high-level guidelines. But more important, it was possible to request data from different companies within same research proposal. So not only you will get data in different data models, but you will also get data identified differently, which will add to the headache of the researchers who are trying to pull and create new hypotheses. With our data background, we felt there was an opportunity there to create a standard for data identification based on robust data models, obviously CDISC in this case. And we started this initiative, I think, about 2 years ago in the summer of 2014. Our goal was to gather participants from across the industry, from pharma, CROs, software, academia, but also involve data privacy specialists. And the original plan was to focus first on SDTM and potentially tackle ADAM afterwards, and look at problems such as data privacy, what rules and rationale to apply to identify data, and then keep some focus on data utility. So data that is delivered to the researcher makes sense and can be used for a broad range of analysis. What we've tried to achieve is very much 2 goals, which is make the assessment of direct and co-identifiers in SIG datasets easier for companies and sponsors who are sharing data, and at the same time ensure that those datasets are consistent in the way they are identified and shared across sponsors. We have a little tradition in the group. We usually take pictures at every meeting. So if you join the group, expect to be on the next set of slides. And again, I'd like to highlight the diversity of our group, which I think really enable to tackle issues and problems from many different angles and really make informed decision on some of the problems that we see. The key principles within our approach is to list all direct and co-identifiers within a given data model, and then assign primary and alternative rules for the identification, while the primary rule will be more suited for proactive data identification and maximize data utility. We're also looking at alternative rule that can be used for specific case, and also when we know what the data utility should be and can adjust the identification specification. We're having, again, a good focus on data utility, and we'll provide more guidance on how to implement such rules. The core of our first deliverable that we released back in May was a Reservoir Spreadsheet with the SDTM model being represented and a number of concepts such as dates, the frequency, recording of identifiers, and so on and so forth being identified within this model and provided with a number of rules and guidance on how to deal with it. In the first deliverable, there was, I think, over 1,400 variables. It was more or less, I think, a 10-month project involving 20+ people. And we also reached out to outside the working group, to a number of sponsors, CROs, professional organizations such as Project Datasphere, Transfer Rate, the European Medical Writer Association, and then a number of universities who also looked at our proposal, again, from mainly from a data agility perspective. What we've produced is available for download on the website, and so far I think we had over 400 downloads on the SDTM data identification standard. In terms of the next steps, we've been looking at different, in terms of the other guidelines, we're working, I would say, in parallel of other organizations. We're trying, of course, to not reinvent the wheel and reference other work when we can. We've been in particular working closely with Transferate as they were developing their guidelines last year, and try to adjust where we could. We've also been reviewing a number of other deliverables that were published in 2015, and that whether we provide more guidance or we reference some of the work that has been published as well. We've also been referenced recently on the EMA anonymization guidance that was published on the 2nd of March 2016. I think our deliverable is referenced about 6 times, mainly in the context of identifying quasi-indirect identifiers and providing rules. And now we're getting a bit more attention from, you could say, parties outside the biometrics arena who are also involved with those kind of public disclosure. And we also had a chance to participate in the discussions with the EMA as a stakeholder and provide feedback on this guidance. The next step for us, well, when we started the project, we were looking at other ways to extend what we've done, looking maybe at therapeutic area standards, at more process and documentation aspects, developing open source scripts based on what we had defined. But I think the more natural step was to look at CDISC ADAM standards, which we started this year and already had a very fruitful meeting back in Washington for the CSS. Right now, I would say that the 3 main discussion points that we are tackling are around this Policy 70 CSR anonymization guidance. Even though you could say CSI is a bit outside the PhUSE remit, you know, we are providing, we're one of the main providers of output for such document. The EMA Policy 70 guidance does suggest that this CSR anonymization should be done, you know, from the analysis data sets rather than being necessarily a parallel process. And we're looking at how, with our data expertise, we could clarify some of the processes around producing the CSR, the anonymized CSR, moving forward. So we have a sub-team working on this right now, and who are preparing a number of topics, trying to progress those topics for the Basel CSS. And then we have 2 sub-teams working on a number of scenarios on how to identify ADAM while reusing as much as possible the SDTM identification standard. And the third sub-team is working with the particular topic of handling imputed dates in ADAM with regards to offsetting in particular, which has proven to be a bit more challenging than SDTM. So that was it. I hope this gives a good overview of what we've done so far and what's ahead. If you want to participate in the group and haven't signed up yet, please sign up, but also contact me so I'm aware of you joining. If you're also interested in reviewing or giving some feedback, we're also interested to have you on board. On this, I will pass on to Philippe, who will tell you about the non-clinical working group.
Thanks, Jean-Marc. So, show my screen, yes. Here we go. So our work group is about non-clinical roadmap, and actually it means SEND, the SEND subpart of SDTM, on dealing with animal data that we are using for toxicology. So we are two actually organizing. So GitHub Housing is co-organizing with myself actually. On what we want to do there is really to go broadly about SAND. SAND is a new addition to SDTM, while the latest one it's really taking advantage of SDTM, but it's also quite specific. It's not fully overlapping with the clinical parts. It's going to be enforced end of the year for many of the studies we are doing. So that means that it's really incoming. There is a strong deadline now for the industry coming. And of course, it will be a revolution for toxicology, because we do not really have the statistical activities that exist in the clinics for several reasons. One of them being that we do not have enough animals. Actually, we can't enroll enough animals, if you prefer. But also because well, toxicology is an old, rusty science, to be honest. So that's very challenging for many people. Changes on the organization, processes, on the IT, of course, on the interpretation of what SAND is, and finally the SAND format is new, so there are many challenges. So our goal overall is to increase awareness and mutual understanding on what SAND is, and also to see the EU community to work together and to create synergies with the US colleagues.
Hi, Philip. This is Chris. I didn't want to interrupt you. I apologize. Just so you know, you're showing your presenter screen and not the slide screen.
Okay, that's a good one. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. So
that's okay. I just thought
well, like that, it will be okay, right? You can read the things.
Yeah, we can. So that's perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. That's the mirroring option not being on.
Yep.
Okay, so on the first day, actually, I'm just going to give you a little bit of the agenda now. So on the first day, we'll have a get-together in a nice place near the Novartis campus. So come with us, even if you're not from the SAND part, that will be the best party around. And then on the second day, we'll really go for the breakouts. So 4 things here. The first one is about introduction on having the agent's perspectives on SAND. Second one is perspective from people who are really working with it right now, CROs on companies. And then the third one is to think about where we go actually. So it's, as said before, it's new for toxicology. That means that we have to have an eye on the SAND format, but also an eye on what we can do now that we have that format available for data exchange. And then the latest one is really to deal with the question of what are we going really? If we are a group, what can we achieve? What are the questions and where do we go? So in more details, the first breakout is about agencies on sorry on well, we'll give an overview of what's going on, of course. So we have a talk from the FDA. We have somebody from PMDA will join also remotely. We were not able to secure somebody from the EMA, and the reason for that is that it's a little bit early actually for that, but we will have some people in the room actually from the EMA. And then we'll have a talk coming from the IMI2, so the Innovative Medicine Initiative about data sharing with SAND. So that's a pretty large consortium with 10 pharma companies on board, and maybe SMEs, and a lot of SMEs joining soon. So that's a very interesting plan actually. So what we hope to achieve there is really to know where we are in terms of what's going on and who needs to have what actually where. Then we'll go for the second one, which is really the perspective on SAN. So people from CROs, Covance and Cytox Lab, but also people from pharma companies. So Bayer here will present actually what they did, and we really want to share actually the real experience. So what have been good, what have been problematic. Well, discuss about the format, discuss about real implementation. It's something which is happening now in toxicology in many places, and we want to centralize a little bit the thing. Then the breakout session 3 is about the future. So where do we go? So SAN is still progressing. A lot of things are incoming. Actually, a lot of work is going in right now. It's a critical time for it. And I will actually give an example of what we do within Novartis, where we did use that for large data warehousing, and we create but also import from CRO some SAN data. So just to give an idea about what is doable now that we have that shuttle. And then the very interesting thing, the best part is the final one, of course. Our goal here is to discuss as a group about where we are, with SAN, but what are the things that we need, what are the things that would be nice, discuss of course what was covered already as part of the US efforts, where well, many people from Europe are involved there, and it will not change. That's not a competition yet. It's really synergies that we will look for, and then we'll try to come up with really a plan. What are we going to do tomorrow to make SAN better, or to make the use of SAN better? And we hope to have concrete actions and to add one or maybe two working groups actually to the non-clinical part. So that would be really a nice achievement for us, and I really hope that we'll get there. I can tell you already that it's pretty crowded on our breakout sessions. There is a lot of people who joined already, and there is a great diversity of people. So I think it's going to be an amazing place to be. On that, actually, I will hand over to Scott, if I can. Sorry. So Scott is going to discuss about SDTM on ADAM implementation on the frequent questions that are seen there. Scott, you should be on stage. We can't hear you.
I see. Is that actually? I think you need to hand it to Bhavin. Actually, Philippe, you hand to Bhavin. Bhavin.
I think the slides are okay, but we have no sound,
okay.
Right?
Yeah, Bhavin, you want to take yourself off mute? There we go. Now I hear you.
Chris?
Yes, we hear you now. We see you and we hear you.
All right, perfect. And you see my screen as well, right?
Yep.
All right.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bhavin Busa. Thank you, Philippe, for handing over. And good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Today, we're going to talk about just, basically a high-level overview of a newly formed project. It's called SDTM and ADAM Implementation FAQ, which is going to be part of the working group, which is already established, optimizing the use of data standards. And just to give you guys a little background, let's see. All right, yeah. To provide a little more background on how this project got initiated, in the recent PhUSE CSS in US, which was held in March 2016, not April, there was a lot of questions that came up across common challenges on SDTM and ADAM from the industry. There was a lot of discussion around, implementation of SDTM IG, ADAM IG, and then it was very apparent that these challenges were very common across various organizations in the industry. And I think there was about, when this discussion was held, it was sort of the discussion was on standards implementation nuances, discussion session at the CSS, and there was a lot of questions collected. And I think what I got from the panelists was about 5 to 6 pages. And these are all the common challenges, questions that, everybody was asking the same question around the table. And I think it was very apparent that, we form and we collate these questions and put it all together. And so there was a need of a forum and subsequent knowledge base to address these challenges. And that's, that resulted in creating a project as part of the standards group. And we think about creating a framework for compilation of these common SDTM and ADAM implementation challenges. As you know, right, some of the questions that were directly related to, different versions of IG used across industry. There's a new version that is released. What about what do people do on the old version? What about the control terminology? What are the compliance checks that get sort of released, with time? How do one go about interpretation of certain domains which are vaguely defined in the IG? For example, what is the best practice to use supplemental qualifier over findings about domain for events and intervention? So these are the common challenges which were discussed during that session. And I think it was a great idea for PhUSE to put together this project, because what we want to do is to collect these FAQs, common challenges from the industry, and then as part of the PhUSE project team, which will, have people from like SMEs in the industry, people from FDA, and people from a CDISC representative, and compose all these questions together, and then come out with sort of the common agreed upon methodology to address them. And I think that's what this project team will do. We'll put together these implementation challenges, and we'll collate all these questions and sort of release this on PhUSE Wiki and forum. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this is a joint activity between PhUSE and CDISC. We'll have representatives from the industry, from sponsors and vendors, along with, of course, representative from the FDA and industry. We've already got good traction on this project. We've got volunteers from all over the world, basically, to participate in this project. The good thing is we're not starting from scratch. This is something that the PhUSE non-clinical working group has already done for SEND, and we've actually connected with the group there, and we have learned from what they have put together, and it's actually working out pretty well. So we're gonna take what they have put together and sort of replicate that for SDTM and ADAM. This is, as I mentioned, this is relatively new. This sort of got started as a result of CSS conference in March. We're trying to put together a team. In the kickoff, we of course want to kick this off before the EU CSS. We would like to put together a team, and I'm sure there will be discussion in the conference this year in June when it happens. And of course, unfortunately, I won't be able to attend, but I know there will be people who's going to lead this effort. And as I said, there's already a project team. I'm Bhavin Busa. I'm the co-lead along with Matt Bryant. And then we have already a representative from CDISC, Barry, and then from FDA, Jade. And I mentioned we have Troy, who's a non-clinical advisor, who's helping us sort of what they have done in SEND and sort of leverage from what they have learned over a couple of years, and then implement that for SDTM and ADAM. Of course, we want to leverage experience from Scott and Jane, who are going to be in, as part of the team. But also, we have already have 10 additional team members from the industry who have signed up. But we do need more volunteers to join the project. And, the reason being, we need to collect, I think that's first part of the project. What we want to do is we want to collect these commonly asked questions, challenges from the industry, even from the FDA, and then put it all together and then collate it and come up with the common methodology, and then sort of, have the SMEs review it, have the CDISC member review it, and post it on our PhUSE Wiki, and then even have a forum discussion along those FAQs or common challenges, which will eventually, if there's a topic which gets initiated in the forum, the plan is to put that as part of the commonly asked questions. And I think we do need more people for this, and I'm sure at the EU CSS there will be more volunteers. So feel free to contact either myself, Bhavin, or Matt on this email, or you could, of course, reach out to any of the panelists who are presenting today. With this, I'm going to hand it over to Chris.
We have too many Chris's. Which one are you going to?
Oh, Chris. Chris is back. But actually, Chris,
yeah,
I'm going to give it.
Chris Price, are you on?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me, Chris?
I can hear you. Were you planning? Did you have slides? Should I hand this to you, or would you like to just talk about the project?
If you'd like to throw the ball over, I can. I have some slides.
Great. Excellent, excellent. Let me bear with me for just a minute, and I will hand it to you. You should get the request momentarily.
Okay. Yep, I have that now.
Okay, great.
Okay, can you see my screen?
I can see your screen, and I can hear your voice. We're good to go.
Excellent. Right. Okay, so hi everyone. My name's Chris Price. I'm based in the UK at Roche, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Future Forum Process Working Group, and also on behalf of Shafi Chowdhury, the co-leader with me of this project. So, you may recognise this slide from a previous webinar when the Future Forum was introduced. We're one of the new kids on the block in terms of working groups, and the process scope for, well, the project scope for the process working group is really to look at defining optimal processes to enable new ways of working and to increase collaboration, and really looking to identify where we as clinical programmers can take a lead and add value. Now, we've broken this down into sort of two key areas that we think are particularly important. One is collaboration, and the second one is looking at all the different new types of data and studies that are coming up regularly. And these are really based on the outcomes from the Future Forum meeting that took place last August. And what we've done initially as part of the working group is to develop what we've called some business challenges related to these two areas. So with collaboration, there's a number of roadblocks to cross-industry collaboration in the pre-competitive space. And the question we have is what steps can be taken to increase internal support for employees taking part in external collaborative projects. Now, there are a number of great examples of where collaboration is taking place, not least PhUSE CSS, but also things like Transcelerate, work on data sharing platforms. But there's differing approaches at different companies with regard to collaboration. How can we maybe assist that to make it more of the automatic response to any challenge? And then also looking at the environment that we currently work in. It's changed, and we accept that it's going to continue changing in the future. But at the moment, the way we work has not necessarily kept pace with this constantly changing pace. So what could we do to address that? And related to that, what we do for analysis of data, it's more about, it's becoming more about the identification and visualization of trends in real time, as opposed to what we probably traditionally have seen as sort of static analyses, which have been done to support study reports. And we're seeing, obviously, this means that there's obviously a lot more collaboration that's being done with non-programmers, with clinical programmers really helping to drive decision-making. The second topic is new types of data and studies, and what we've quickly established is trying to predict what types of data and studies that will emerge in the future is really difficult. But what doesn't change is that clinical programmers must be able to quickly adapt their ways of working in order to deal with these different types of data from different sources. And obviously, with new types of data, there's no standards that exist because by definition they're new. And really what we want to look to do is how can clinical programmers work effectively with this data without reinventing the wheel each time. Secondly, companies are also now expected to share their patient-level data with researchers and potentially include other companies as well in that. And how will companies adapt in a world where data is shared much more openly and not only to be analysed internally? And part of this will also be things like the defence of internal analyses. be it challenges on the theoretical work that's been done, but also on the practical pieces of how things might have been programmed as well. So this was something that else we're going to need to react to in this new world. So that's a brief summary of some of the business challenges that the process team sees with regard to the future, and what we're looking to really do at CSS is really agree on some of these business challenges and evaluate each of these and establish how important we feel each of these is and what the impact of each business challenge is. And because we're a volunteer group, we need to evaluate and prioritize our potential deliverables. So we're hoping to try and put out a couple of deliverables this year, but what we want to be able to do is take some feedback from the CSS meeting to really establish what people view as the most important deliverables to be working on. And we have already some ideas for deliverables, but obviously these hopefully will grow at the CSS meeting. So it might be a case of defining what the pre-competitive space actually is. Really look at what the benefits for cross-industry collaboration for internal company use. Maybe a white paper on how we might want to break down silos that might have sprung up in companies over time. Maybe a white paper looking at best practice and points to consider relating to how we develop a process for working with new data types. Or maybe it's a case of looking at best practice in terms of how to react to publication of external analysis on the same data sets that have been used internally. How you might work with other companies' data to inform decision making, and also looking at how historical placebo controls could be used in live clinical studies and how that might work from a process point from a clinical programmer's viewpoint. So and there's many more of different deliverables that could be looked at to support these business challenges. So I think it's going to have a really good discussion on all of these pieces. And what we'd also then like to do is actually not just talk about these, but actually start working on some of these at CSS. So the sort of 5 hours on the Wednesday are I think are going to really fly by. And if you've not already signed up to join us at CSS at the EU CSS, we'd love you to sign up and come along and join us and take part in the discussion. If you do have any further questions or want to get involved, these are Shafi's and my contact details, so please get in touch, and we'd love to hear from you and for you to join the discussion. So, Chris, do I hand back to you now?
Yeah, why don't you hand back to me, and I will put the projects up on the screen as soon as it comes back.
There you go.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you to all the speakers today for being very crisp and efficient. We managed to get through all 7 of those and with a few minutes to spare. So we did have 2 questions that came up. If there are others, please put them in the chat panel. The first question, which I will provide to, I think Geoff Low will take this one. What about the dataset XML format that BCDisc came out with a little over a year ago? How does that factor into the project that you're working on in the SAS transport format project?
That's a great question. Yes, we've certainly had that as one of the candidates. The problem we have is we can have any number of different formats suggested, but we need to have some way of indexing them. We know that dataset XML has already been evaluated by the FDA for a submission format, but as I said, the outcome was a wee bit sort of murky. So what we want to try and do is come up with a canonical set of criteria that we can use to evaluate these formats in a semi-objective fashion. Joseph Yates, who is one of the chief architects behind it, he has been on 1 or 2 of the calls, and for all I know, he asked that particular question. So yes, it's definitely on our radar.
Okay, thank you, Geoff. The other question was from the audience was that the CSS EU working group will be working independently from the CSS FDA working group. How do two groups communicate and work together? I would actually ask that folks take a different mindset to this, that it's really not EU or FDA. That's simply a geographic logistical challenge that we have. The reality is that these working groups are and should be global, as I stated earlier in the presentation. And the thought process should be that we're all working together. And the people that are actually facilitating these sessions in Basel in about 3 weeks are people that have been on these projects and these working groups. Now, we can't all, unfortunately be in the same place physically all the time, but this is an opportunity for us to sort of continue to work towards being global as an organization, as volunteers. So I think about it in that regard. And from a logistics standpoint, the groups working on these projects here will get back together with the global groups and projects that are working together and share the information that was moved forward in these conversations. So, Jane, was there any other questions that I missed? Just double checking again.
Hello. No, that was it.
Okay, great. Well, again, I want to thank our presenters today for being crisp and being willing to volunteer to take this on. We all have our real jobs, and taking this effort on and wanting to get behind improving what we do every day is very important. So I hope that we see everyone in Basel in just a little over 3 weeks, about 4 weeks. We'll see everybody there and continue this collaboration. So I wish everybody a great day, and we will sign off of the webinar at the moment. The presentations and the recordings will be saved onto the website within the next week, so you can share them with your fellow workers and colleagues. So thank you, and I hope everyone has a great day.